I got baptized when I was 6, but I never uh, got it. And I may not even have had real communion with the Spirit until she left. And I finally understood, because I remember standing in my foyer going and praying for her and looking up, because there was a kind of semicircular window over my front door. And just looking through that, like I was looking up to heaven and going, oh, Lord, she just needs you so much. She needs you. And almost audibly, it was, yeah, so do you, for all the same reasons.
Well, welcome to City Square Podcast, where we talk with everyday people about faith and work. My name is Micah. My guest tonight is Chad Drake. He is a husband, father, and financial analyst from DFW, Texas. In his spare time, he enjoys talking theology, gaming with his friends, and spending time with his family. How's it going, Chad?
So far, so good. Coming up on the end of another week. I can't believe October is like halfway over. This nightmare year will, and then it'll get worse, you know. So.
It could always get worse.
It could always get worse.
You're not post-mill, right?
What's that?
You're not post-mill, right?
Not yet. You just need some evidence of things getting better.
Yeah. Headline chasers, regardless.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
Man, I love this kind of stuff. Looking forward to
awesome. So I want to get to know you a bit. We'll start with your childhood, if you're cool with that.
Yep.
And if we dig up any past trauma, then you can bill your counseling services to us.
Perfect.
I promise.
Great.
I promise.
All the repressed memories. I'm looking forward to dredging them up.
Nice. So where actually did you grow up?
I was born in Western North Carolina. Every once in a while, the accent still comes through. It's a lot stronger when I'm back there with family. It's just a neat phenomenon. My wife commented on it when she came back to meet them for the first time. And you get to thinking about it. It's like, well, it's easier. It's easier to talk for all intents and purposes in the native language. Conversation flows more quickly. People get more comfortable. Anyway, I still love it there. It's God's country. I know everybody says Texas is God's country, but those old forested mountains and waterfall, just you can't beat it. You really can't beat it. And there's nothing like that out here. At least not anywhere near where I'm at. So, but yeah, I grew up there most of my childhood. Started high school there, and then my mom picked up and moved us to Nebraska. It was tough. It was really tough to leave an entire life behind, leave my dad and dad's side of the family behind. On this side of things, the Lord clearly was working in that. Met great people in the Midwest, demographically going to a maritime academy from a landlocked Midwestern state was a great help. There were only 2 of us in my class. So, that's Nebraska is a very interesting place. And you think Appalachia, you think like moonshiners, rednecks, Hatfields and McCoys type of thing. And the really funny thing about moving to Nebraska was my friends from North Carolina would ask me these crazy questions like, so what's it like not to have running water? And what's it like riding horses everywhere you need to go? But they were serious. They were dead serious questions. So my very oldest and best friends from Appalachia, genuinely curious about basically what it was like to become Amish just by moving out to the Midwest.
Interesting. I guess there's a Canadian equivalent to that, which is, do you guys have like cars and stuff? Do you live in igloos? Like I've had people unironically ask me that, and I'm like, no, like I grew up in a suburb.
Is it Saskatchewan that's like the backwoods of Canada?
Probably, yeah. That's kind of Midwesty sort of. Alberta is kind of like Canada's Texas. And then you've got a few other throwaway, like the flyover states, right? Like Manitoba, Saskatchewan. Those are kind of in the central because all the big stuff happens in either on the coast or, central and Ontario and stuff like that, Quebec. So that's funny. That's funny. So they were dead serious. They thought you were in some sort of frontier town.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So it was fun to educate. It actually took a lot longer to disabuse them of that notion than I would have expected. But after weeks of phone calls and reassuring them, I do in fact have electricity. We do have lights and running water. We still drive cars, and there are roads and stores. Yeah, just it's funny, the presuppositions you aren't aware that you have.
Yeah, that's the first I've ever heard of that for Nebraska anyway. But I guess it kind of makes sense. That's small population and, not a lot is known about it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I never bothered to check this, but the popular statistic for living in Nebraska is you may or may not be familiar with the college football team, the Cornhuskers. That's University of Nebraska-Lincoln. But the popular common knowledge statistic is that on any given game day, home game day, 85% of the state is either in Lincoln or watching the game on TV.
And that's like legit or unverified, but plausible.
Yeah. That's what everybody says. They're real proud of that. This idea that the whole state comes together on game day and worships at the the idol of the Cornhusker.
Wow. Yeah, that's fascinating. So you moved to Nebraska. Was that in the middle of high school? Or
yeah. So I finished my freshman year and we moved that summer. Well, my first friends there were band nerd friends. Got to walk into the middle of band camp, and you got the novelty factor working in your favor there. You come from a place where people have literally known you your entire life, and I don't think I capitalized on it, but you have this opportunity to reinvent yourself with the new people coming in fresh. But no, I figured I'd just be who I was and let my people find me, and sure enough, they did. Almost immediately. The friends I made that day were my closest and dearest friends for the rest of high school.
That was my next question. Were you jock, nerd, band geek, band nerd, whatever the phrase is?
Yeah, I think the base layer is always going to be nerd of some kind, but I know, not to toot my own horn, I don't even know if it's a good thing necessarily, but we had a really eclectic friend group in high school. So it was a lot of moving in and out, blurring the lines. So I was really good friends with a couple of cheerleaders, very, very popular cheerleaders. I was good friends with some traditional jocks, the football star, the home team quarterback guy, but most of my friends would have been in the band, speech, drama circles. And so it was the first time I'd never been introduced to the idea of competitive speaking until I moved to Nebraska. And our high school, you were required to take a year of speech. Your sophomore year, you had to take speech class. And so interesting, you hear this idea that people would literally rather die than speak in public. And it doesn't sound real, like it sounds like an exaggeration, but it's true. It is true. At least in that group of 14, 15-year-old kids, people were just literally terrified. They would lock up, they would pass out. Like it was so interesting. Wow. So I still remember, but I joined the competitive speaking team. I did some entertainment speaking, some extemporaneous speaking, some duet acting, which was a lot of fun. I still remember in the class, you had to do, I forget what the fancy term for it is, but you had to do a dialogue, both parts of a dialogue. And so mine was Bilbo and Smaug in the treasure room of of the Lonely Mountain. So
Awesome.
I'll say my performance was heavily influenced by the Rankin Bass 1970s Hobbit cartoon. So.
I don't know if I remember the details of the dialogue from that film.
It's very, very close to verbatim from the books. They do like it probably takes, I don't know, like between an hour and a half to watch the whole movie. It was actually a mini series that aired in the 70s. But they pick, it's like tranches of really, really close faithfulness to what's going on in the books. So much so that they make it awkward. Like there's a difference between reading Gandalf say, "I am Gandalf," and Gandalf means me, and saying it out loud. It's such a dumb thing to say. It sounds so awkward. But they do that just like they did in Jackson's. But the conversation between Smaug and Bilbo it's good. Like it's very like my teeth are swords, my claws spears, my wings a hurricane. But taken in isolation, if you don't already love the source material, it comes across a little weird.
It's poetic. That's all. It's just poetic. So what did you play in band?
I was a trumpet player. I was literally the best in the state, as far as I know. I had come from North Carolina, being the best in the state there. Well, I got in first chair in the all-state band. Came and did it again in Nebraska. So every trumpet player will tell you that they're the best. In fact, the joke goes, how many trumpet players does it take to screw in a light bulb? I don't know if you know the answer.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just one. He holds it up, and the world revolves around him. But that's I was actually quite good. So I played some Wynton Marsalis solos for competition. We did a senior solo where each senior, if they wanted to, got to give a performance in the whole band was the accompaniment. So I really enjoyed it. I had actually secured a spot in the Marine Corps band, not the President's Own, but in the Marine Corps band, with that being the ultimate goal was to get to the President's Own. But instead, I got appointed to the Merchant Marine Academy, which is one of the only two ways to break an enlistment contract, is to get appointed to a Federal Service Academy. So I went there and played the trumpet.
So you had actually signed a contract for Marine Corps?
Yep, I did the whole shebang. I got enlisted. I went and did the medical exam, which was really weird. Nobody talks about how weird it is. In the military, you just get used to that kind of poking and prodding, But for an 18-year-old kid, it was a little weird. No, but they checked me out and gave me the green light and signed my papers, took my oath, and I was all set to go to boot camp with a buddy of mine. And instead, I went to the academy. So he stayed on that track, and although he was a reservist, I was going to be full-time active duty. But he's still in, and he just made gunnery sergeant, which is a really big deal.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So that was the plan. Then go have the military, like pay for college. Did you have any idea of your potential career path after that, or were you just trying to feel it out?
Yeah, at that point, I was kind of waffling. Since I'd been a kid, I wanted to be an astronaut, and I learned as I grew up that that's not, you don't just go to the job fair and be an astronaut. The best, most traditional path to that is to be a fighter pilot, a military pilot. And so that's really what I wanted to do. That was my primary goal. Of course, all pilots have to be commissioned officers. Can't be an enlisted person flying their planes in their helicopters. They want you to be college educated before you turn on the multi-million-dollar piece of machinery, I guess. But my backup plan then was, if I don't get into one of the academies, I still want to serve. And here's the other thing I know I'm really good at, which is playing the trumpet. So I will do that. And maybe someday I'll go get a music degree and I'll be a band director. At the time, that seemed like a good backup.
Yeah.
And then I got to the academy and actually became the bandmaster. And I was like, nope, I don't want to do. I don't want to do. I don't want to deal with these people. I don't want to deal with parents. I don't want to deal with administration. Like,
Oh yeah.
You forget in those modes that there's the thing you really love and want to do. There's all the crap that surrounds it that you have to do in order to do the thing you love to do.
So it's not just music all day. It's the bureaucracy and dealing with angry parents because their baby didn't make first chair. Oh, that's hilarious.
I got my fill. I ran the band for a year, my senior year, or my first class year at the academy, and said, no, that has fulfilled me. I am satisfied. Got it out of my system.
That's funny. Oh. So during high school, did you have any like steady hobbies or stuff you went back to outside of band and school?
Yeah, I mean, it's exhausting now to think of all the stuff we did. We were that age, but we tried to start a couple of ska bands of our own. There's a few of us in the band tried to start a band, and we were terrible. It was just awful. But we played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. That was where I had been playing on and off since I was quite young, actually. But that's where we really found kind of a core group to hunker down and build these grand sweeping campaigns and really actually learn the rules and build characters. And we do round robin dungeon mastering. And I mean, most of the time we were literally making it up as we went. Like we didn't really have a monster manual. It was just, I think this thing would have 300 hit points. Oh, you killed it too fast. Now it has 600. The armor class would or the THACO, I guess at the time, THACO would fluctuate wildly throughout a single fight. But those were heady days of staying up until 4 a.m. and chugging Mountain Dew and cookies and pizza and still waking up and weighing like 120 pounds.
If only.
If only. I was talking. We play video games. We were really into my best friend at the time and I were really into video games, and we had a really strange hobby. Actually, now that I haven't thought about this in years, but we used to go out because he lived pretty far out into the country and totally surrounded by farms. But we would stay up. We'd stay up playing D&D and video games until about 1 or 2 a.m, where it's really good and dark and everybody's asleep. And we'd all get all dressed up in dark clothing and camo, and we get our guns and our swords and our knives and some trail rations, and we just go tromping around the countryside for hours. And we called it what do we call it? We call it gallivanting. It was. But we got hunted by coyotes, surprised by a badger one time. We would mess with very stupid. We would try to mess with drivers, like as we see them coming down the road. We would wait in the ditches and then pop out right as they came by, so their headlights would hit us, and then we'd run away. It's just stupid high school kid stuff.
So I'm guessing that's where Chupacabra Legends came from. It's actually Chad Drake and best friend.
Yeah, looking back, it was pretty typical stupid stuff. We didn't really get into anything too wild or crazy. We didn't party. We didn't drink. We didn't do drugs or anything like that. Just a bunch of stupid kids having fun.
I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he somehow came up that he didn't have a curfew when he was, because he was a good kid and trusted by his parents. And I was like, oh, you didn't have a curfew? Like, what? Did you have a set curfew, or did you?
No, I through years of diligent obedience and being the eldest son and being a self-righteous, proud achiever, yes, managed not to have a curfew when I could drive.
Congratulations!
I had to come and wake up mom and let her know I was home, no matter what time it was. That was the only rule.
It's 4 a.m.
Yep, 4 a.m., 6 a.m. Didn't matter. There were a couple of times where I forgot, or I thought, well, it's really, really late. I don't want to wake her up. And then she would come to find out she'd actually already been laying awake, wondering if I was dead somewhere, because that's just, how our mind works. Well, worked.
Some moms do. So you mentioned like well-behaved, self-righteous. Were you involved in the church then from like birth, childhood, or?
Yeah, my folks were really good about keeping me in church, even after they split. Um, but I was raised very, very stereotypical Southern Baptist, so kind of didn't matter which church we were at. We were usually getting screamed at by a heavy preacher about how we're all going to hell and we deserve it, and there's usually various sweat and spittle flying into the splash zone, right there in front of the pulpit. But it was still formative, and even though I didn't realize it at the time, that's what I needed to hear. I needed to hear that on my own, I deserved hell. I deserved condemnation and judgment. But yeah, so a Southern Baptist growing up, and then when we moved to Nebraska, I was trying today to remember the name of the church we went to, and it's probably better that I don't say it on the interwebs here, but it was a Berean church, which I had never heard of before, and was not familiar enough with the Bible at that point to know who the Bereans were. But it was the first pastor I encountered who was really a teaching pastor. I still remember the first sermon I went to, and he was just preaching through one of the Gospels, but he put a map up and showed us, okay, this is where Jesus was. Here's why that's culturally significant, and here's how long it would take to walk from Jerusalem to Nazareth, or wherever he was. I don't remember exactly where the sermon was, but just like, and he would explain the Greek. The idea to me, the Bible hadn't always been in English, and never occurred to me. Nobody ever thought to tell me. I never bothered to check.
Yeah.
I guess functionally a KJV onlyist at the time. But it blew my mind. But it awakened in me an actual passion that played to my intellectual pride, but an actual passion to, oh wow, it's not just a storybook. There's all this rich depth of history and culture and significance and connection behind it. And so having somebody who was a more intellectual, calm preacher kind of wooed me into actually starting to pick up, even though I wouldn't have put it in those terms at the time, real theological understanding.
Gotcha. So when were you like aware of becoming a believer, or when did you become a believer?
That's a good question. So I, like many people in the Bible Belt, was baptized very young. I walked forward. The real reason I walked forward was because I was jealous of the attention that my younger sister, had gotten by walking forward. I think like a couple of weeks prior, and she got her own Bible, and everybody was just so excited and so happy. And it just popped into my head that I could walk down and get the same, attention at the time. Now, was the Lord working in that moment? Yes, absolutely. But he was working on a very proud and selfish little boy. So I got baptized when I was 6. And like I said, spent my youth in the church. Going through the Berean church, hearing that pastor's sermons, and my own stepfather had a more cerebral, I guess you could say, approach to scripture. But then going to the academy from there, unfortunately, there's probably a sermon in this too, but at the academy, obviously you have people from many faiths. So there's a beautiful little chapel on campus, and it has a centerpiece that actually it's a three-sided centerpiece, so it rotates. There's a Protestant face and a Catholic face and a Jewish face, and so it rotates depending on which faith is having its service at the time. Well, we had a very nice Presbyterian chaplain who was just, I mean, it was like getting a sermon from a styrofoam cutout. It was so dull and passionless, and it was just, again, very nice man. Wow, not what I would call a gifted preacher. So I actually started going to mass when I was at the academy because the priest was fantastic. His homilies were great. I had a couple of Catholic friends. Of course, the academy is in New England, and so a bunch of these guys come from New York and Pennsylvania, and very strong Catholic presence there. And so I dated a Catholic girl in high school, but I never really bothered to learn much about it, except to hold it up proudly as an obstacle to why we couldn't stay together after I left. It's like, no, you're Catholic. I'm Protestant. It'll never work. It was so dramatic,
Convenient.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a whole other story. But
next time,
I actually started going to mass, and I would ask my friends, like, so what, like this is cool. Like it's cool to me because it's new. I've never been to a service like this, but you've been doing this your whole life. Like, what do you get out of it? And I remember my buddy Paul. He said, "There's just something really special about the idea that I can walk into any Catholic church anywhere in the world, and no matter what language the service is in, I know exactly what's going on. I know exactly the meaning behind everything that we're doing." And so it was really my first exposure to liturgy and any version of high church. And I really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed, like I said, the priest was a really fun guy, a very spirited preacher as well, but also had a very firm actual grasp on the gospel. And to a bunch of aspiring sailors, having somebody there who could weave that in to some very that's what I'm looking for, trouble-seeking young minds was indispensable. So fast forward from there, I remained it was the first place I ever really had to defend my faith. Because I would actually, one of my roommates was a functional atheist, and it was the first real pushback I'd ever gotten against the worldview of Christianity, like the ideology of Christianity. But all it really did was push me into apologetics, which is obviously useful and profitable and helpful. But for me, being a proud, arrogant, self-righteous person still at the time, all it did was puff me up, which is exactly what the Bible says that knowledge of its own accord does. So I spent a lot of time just thinking I was killing it because I knew all this stuff. And it wasn't until I was left by my first wife that the message of the gospel actually came home to roost. So you asked a very good question. I got baptized when I was 6, but I never got it. And I may not even have had real communion with the Spirit until she left. And I finally understood, because I remember standing in my foyer going and praying for her and looking up, because there was a kind of semicircular window over my front door. And just looking through that, like I was looking up to heaven and going, "Oh, Lord, she just needs you so much. She needs you." And almost audibly, it was, "Yeah, so do you." And for all the same reasons. And it was like, click. Oh, I'm a sinner. Now I get it. And so from that point, that's really when Jesus actually changed my life. Like, knowing Jesus actually changed my life and bore weight on my life, and how I thought, how I spent my time, how I talked, how I approached, how I thought of people. Like, it just started changing everything. So very long answer to a very good question.
That's awesome. Wow. And that's quite a bit like a time jump forward from the academy then.
Yes. So that was
Gotcha.
2012. Yeah.
Okay. So you went to the academy, and that was the Merchant Marine Academy, or one of them was it New York, or was it okay.
It's the only federal service academy that's a Merchant Marine Academy. There are other maritime academies. There's Maine, Massachusetts, Texas A&M. There's even a Great Lakes Maritime Academy, which I've only met a few people who went there, but they're a really interesting breed.
Doesn't seem like there'd be as much to do in the Great Lakes as there were.
It's bustling about 8 months out of the year. But once the lakes freeze over, all the ships get laid up, and you do what's called winter work, which is most ships they go a few years in between visits to the shipyard, but on the lakes you have to get the boats out of the water before everything freezes, and there's your chance to get all that shipyard work done every year.
So can you define Merchant Marine for totally not me, but in our viewers who don't have any idea what that actually is?
Absolutely. When most people, when they hear Merchant Marine, they go, "Oh, you're a Marine. Oh, you're in the Marine Corps." And after a while, I think all of us just got to the point where it's like, yes, I'm in the Marine Corps.
Sure.
The United States Merchant Marine is best understood now as the fleet of American flagged, American built, American owned merchant cargo ships that bring everything here and take everything away. Shipping remains the cheapest but slowest way to move the most of basically anything. The most oil, the most bananas, the most shoes, the most grain, the most cars. Just about anything you can think of has probably moved over water. In World War II, the Merchant Marine was actually a uniform service. And this is just the fun you can play with statistics, right? So obviously a much smaller service than, say, the Army or the Air Corps, but percentage-wise, by far the highest death rate. Because in a war, the smart thing to do to cripple your enemy is not just to kill their soldiers, but to cripple their supply lines. And so the deadliest theater in terms of rate of death was actually the Murmansk Run in the North Sea. That's where a lot of the U-boats took out a lot of Merchant Marine ships as they were trying to resupply the Allies in the North Shores of Europe.
Wow.
So we're the only academy who's allowed to carry a battle standard, because during World War II, and in fact in every single military conflict since the academy was founded, we've had cadets and midshipmen on ships actually going into battle. So we get to carry a battle standard. We lost 142 midshipmen during World War II. And it's just a lot of really rich, unique history around that. And didn't know until I went to the academy that my great-grandfather actually, was a Merchant Marine cook during World War II.
Oh.
Yeah, so I don't have it here, but I've got this really nice shadow box of his service photo of mine, his license, mine, and his Z card, and my Z card, his discharge, my discharge. So really neat, unexpected connection to my own heritage there.
Yeah, how cool. Okay, so then you went to the Marine Academy. What did you actually study while you were there? It wasn't just to, run a ship, right?
Not just, yeah. So
only.
So you'll remember that my original goal, if I got into an academy, was to be a fighter pilot so that I could be an astronaut. So originally I went to study, my major was called Marine Engineering Systems, which is still going to be focused around the idea of running a ship from an engineering standpoint, making all things go. But that systems part of it was meant to indicate that it was a more robust in some ways, a more all the courses of study were difficult and challenging for different reasons. In the Marine Engineering Systems course, your capstone project at the end of your first class year was to design a ship from the keel up, every system, everything. And then you had to present this design to a panel of industry experts and defend it. So, but the thing about the systems major at the time was you could select a minor, and one of the minors available was aeronautical engineering. And so I figured, well, I'm going to be a pilot. I didn't understand at the time that the deck and engine disciplines are very different. So I came there thinking like a normal college, you could just kind of a la carte choose your courses. Like, I'll take terrestrial navigation. That sounds fun. Oh, celestial navigation. That sounds fun. And when you live and work in the dungeon of the engine room on a ship, there's not you don't see the land, you don't see the stars, and you're certainly not the one navigating. That's the deck department's job. So that was the grand plan when I went was to get an engineering degree with an aeronautical minor, which would hopefully make me more attractive to the Navy or the Marine Corps or the Air Force or somebody when I graduated, so that I could get a commissioned billet as a fighter pilot, go to flight school and live the dream, be the next astronaut. But a funny thing happened, and that is part of the course of study at the academy is to actually go as a cadet. I already alluded to this, but as a cadet, go and live and work on these merchant ships and actually get a sense of what life is like, what the work entails, very focused on the job training. And I did that and loved it. My first ship was, it was a container ship we caught on the East Coast, and we made a run over to Northern Europe. I got to go to some really awesome places, Southampton, England. Actually, no, I take it back. We didn't go to Southampton on that ship. A little town called Felixstowe, England, which really was just pubs and houses. That's really so. That's all we did was we went to the pubs. But a lot of we went to Bremerhaven, Germany, and Rotterdam in the Netherlands. The work is challenging and interesting and different every day, and made good money, and you get to see the world. And I, just started reflecting on this. It's like, okay, on my chosen path, I can kill people for a living. On this path, I could not do that and make good money and see the world and all these great things. And the work I just found it immediately engaging and fulfilling. So I came back and changed my major, and I moved from systems to what we would call straight engine, which is it is designed to get you ready to be a ship's engineer, and really nothing else. A lot more elective slots there, so I was able to tailor it more to the kinds of shipboard systems that were interesting to me. But that's what I graduated with, a Bachelor of Science as a marine engineer. Commission in the United States Navy, and Coast Guard license as a third assistant engineer. And so I went to sea for the better part of 10 years.
So as a ship's engineer, what were you responsible for on the ship? Or you were a third ship's engineer?
Yep. So different nationalities have different systems. Some of them start at second, some of them start at fourth, and there is no chief engineer. There's so in our the American hierarchy of merchant shipping, there's a third, second, first assistant engineer, and then the chief engineer. So we really have four guys on the ship, and this can be a 1,200-foot long ship carrying millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of cargo at any given time. And your job is to be able to fix anything and maintain everything to make sure the ship stays running. That's all it's about, is just keep the ship running, get there on time, make the best time you can, keep costs low, all that stuff. Very different animal to military shipboard life. When you're crewing for combat, you don't want lean. You want a lot more people than you need, and everybody needs to have a very specific job, and it needs to be the only thing they do, but they need to do it really, really, really well. But when you're not in combat, when you're polishing handrails, it takes 20 guys to stand around and overhaul a pump. And they just, this guy brings the wrench, and that guy brings the saw, and that guy brings the torch, and that guy brings the bolts, and this guy runs the hoist, and this guy runs it the other way. And, But again, a Navy ship isn't crewed for maintenance efficiency; it's crewed for combat efficiency.
Hmm.
So, as a third engineer, typically the colloquial nickname is the turd engineer, because one of the systems nobody wants to take care of, and you're the young guy on the totem pole, is the sewage treatment plant. You're the turd engineer. But it's usually, it varies ship to ship, but it's usually just the crappy jobs that an engineer needs to do because they need to be done right. They're still complex, systems and everything, but just the jobs nobody wants to do. So the lube oil systems, the sludge oil systems. The most fun part, being the third, was usually you get to take care of the generators, which starts getting to more electrical, which is probably my favorite discipline within this very broad field of engineering. But you move up to the second engineer. Now you get to deal with the fuel system. You get to run the boiler. You get to do the water chemistry for not only the boiler and the steam system, but the cooling, the engine cooling systems, the generator cooling systems. The first engineer is really intended to be more of a daily supervisor, but really kind of needs to know everything. And then the chief engineer really needs to know everything. He's, the buck stops with him. So that's kind of the idea, is you have these four guys who rotate through various levels of responsibility for keeping the ship up, maintaining, repairing, maneuvering, getting the engine ready, shutting the engine down, all this great, interesting stuff.
So are you, what were a couple things. What were the shifts like? And then what was your day like? Maybe an average day. And then also, was stuff going wrong all the time that you had to fix, or was it more of just like daily maintenance?
Yeah. So the answer to all those questions is it depends. It depends on what ship you're on. It depends who the other engineers are. It depends on who the deckies are, the mates and the captain. A ship is a very interesting crucible. It's just you take all these potentially very volatile elements, all these people who have come from all different parts of the world and all different walks of life and all different cultural backgrounds. You throw them onto a steel box in the middle of the ocean that nobody can escape from each other, and you all kind of have to learn to get along. And sometimes it works really well, and sometimes it works really poorly. So it depends. But kind of a high level comparison, on a steamship, usually, everybody's standing watch. Now, more modern ships with more advanced monitoring and alarm systems, it's not as necessary anymore. But I sailed on some old steamships, and it was a lot of fun. But you need somebody in the engine room all the time, constantly walking around, making sure everything is fine. A steam plant is very temperamental. It's very interconnected, and it's a great way to learn engineering, because you pull something over here, you turn this valve, or you run this pump a little too fast or too slow, and it starts to have this cascading effect through the entire plant. So it's a really fascinating thing about steam. But steam plants, to me, have probably the most personality of any power plant, because of that this global multidisciplinary interconnectedness. So a typical day on there, you stand 4 hours of watch. And that's going to be 12 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 12, and then AM and PM. But in between watch, one of those 8-hour blocks is where you get your overtime done. So best practice is not really to do a lot of work when you're on watch, because your job is to watch. And if you're in the machine shop, elbows deep in some rebuild, then very easy to miss one of these little problems that could cascade into a very, very big problem. But on a diesel ship, they're much more modern. The things are much more segmented. You still obviously have interconnected, interdependent systems, but the main engine is either running or it's not. But you don't always have steam right there ready to start turning it if somebody misses something up. But there's more advanced monitoring and alarm systems. So what you can do is just come down and work a 12-hour day, and then you have what we call the duty, and one guy has the duty. Some ships rotated every night, some ships rotated once a week. But if something goes wrong in the plant, then you have a little alarm box in your room. It lights up, it screeches at you. You acknowledge it, run downstairs, see what the problem is, and fix it. Go back to bed. Um, so, and then I never got. So I got to go aboard a gas turbine ship, but I never actually got to sail on one. But they tend to be the most, some of the more advanced, more modern plants. Basically, airplane engine in the engine.
Wow. Yeah. See, I never would have I don't know if it would have crossed my mind. I'm sure it didn't cross other people that there are steam powered ships still in use.
Oh, yes.
And we think of the steam engine as, early 1900s or late 1800s or something like that.
Yeah, no, steam is a great medium because not only can you use it to move stuff, but it's a great heat source too. So on a steamship, the steam plant is really the beating heart of the ship. Now you go back and watch a movie like Titanic or African Queen or something like that, and you'll see these old reciprocating piston steam engines. I actually got to go on one of those. They used to call it a triple expansion engine, and so you have steam. High pressure steam comes into a small piston and pushes it down, and then as it goes down the line, the pistons get bigger and bigger because the steam pressure is getting lower and lower, and you need a bigger and bigger surface area to exert the same force down on the piston. So that's the kind of thing a lot of people think of when they think of an old steam engine, because that's how they used to be. So very much like your car engine, just instead of fuel being injected and combustion and pushing that down, you just have steam pushing the piston down and pushing this down. And but modern steam, it's been the case for a while. They use turbines now, so it's much more efficient.
Okay.
You get a lot more power out of them. You get a lot better expansion out of the steam. So the more the steam expands, the more power you're able to extract from it.
Fascinating. Half of that's over my head, but that is fascinating.
But yeah, you never know. You walk into a modern steam ship, and you don't really see anything moving around. There's a big encased turbine kind of right smack dab in the middle of everything. There's a big gearbox that takes this turbine that spins thousands or tens of thousands of RPM and turns it down to the shaft so it can turn maybe 100. But you don't see any of this going on. You don't see. It's not like the cool boiler room of the Titanic. Exactly.
Wow. Huh. So you shipped out on steam ships, also diesel. How long did you ship out for, sail for?
It depended on the job. When I first started, I was doing what's called relief work, where the guy on the ship, the regular guy on the ship, is time for his vacation, time for him to take some time off. So you just go stand in for him for a few months, and you don't go back to that ship. You just come back to the union hall, and they'll get another ship. And eventually, what I did is I was able to secure myself a permanent position on one of these ships that I was doing relief work for. It's much better. You find one that's got a good crew and decent pay, and the ship's not falling apart. It's got an all right run, and it's just a lot better. It's a lot better to get to know a plant and then come back and not have to trace all the systems again and get to know all the little quirks that every single plant has again. And
yeah.
So I'd be out anywhere from a month to 6 months, I think was probably my longest pitch.
Okay. And then, so would you take that equivalent amount of time off then, or?
Yeah. So the permanent rotation I got into was usually about 3 months on, 3 months off. So obviously you get pay and overtime and stuff while you're on the ship, and then you get a lower amount of vacation pay while you're off. So that you at least got some income coming in. But hey, the nice thing about when you're on the ship, you don't have any bills. The company pays for all the food. The steward cooks it all for you. So, you're really only having to pay normal bills half the year. So now if I had been the financial genius I am now, back then, I would have told my younger self, hey, save some of that money. Don't just go buy a big TV and video games and take trips and stuff like that. But that's not what happened.
Yeah. Young and dumb is a is a thing.
I mean,
I can attest.
well.
So how many years did you do that then total?
Yeah, so it was 4 years at the academy, but only 3 of that was actually in coursework. So they cram 4 years of study into 3 years, and you spend a
Okay.
year at seed. That's broken up as well. So you do 4 months and then you do 8 months. But after graduation, I sailed, I think, about 9 years. Yeah.
Oh, so 9 years in, and you suddenly decide, or maybe it took you a while, that you're done sailing.
Yep. So basically, any stereotype you can think of a sailor or a mariner, or somebody who lives this life, it's true. It's the drinking, the swearing, the womanizing, like it's all true. It's all true. Not of me, not of me, but I was very much the outlier among these guys. So in the the 9 years of shipping and the 4 years of the academy, and that whole time, I met one guy who was still on his first wife, and there's a reason for that. You're gone all the time, and it's funny. The biggest cause of divorce among mariners is not the being gone; it's retirement. So and a lot of times when these guys, you make such good money, you can usually retire pretty. You can like retire in your 50s, right? So a lot of these guys in their 50s, they have middle school and high school age kids. So wife has been at home this whole time, this whole 20-year, 25-year career, and they've just gotten used to you being gone. They've gotten used to how the kids are going to be raised and what the structure of the day looks like. And now all of a sudden, dad's home all the time, and dad's got ideas about how things should run, and how discipline should happen, and what kinds of activities are good and not, and where you should go, and it invariably causes this huge clash. And what these people find out is you spent decades together and you really don't know each other at all. And now that you're spending all the time together, you find out you don't really like each other. You actually kind of hate each other. And so you get divorced. She takes half your pension. You go back to sea, and you do that until you die.
Oof.
That's the story. And some of these guys have done it 5, 6, 7 times. So knowing that I wanted to be a family man, knowing that I wanted to have a stable marriage and actually see my children grow up and be there for things like their births and their big events and their graduations and weddings, and these guys miss all that stuff. The reason this one guy, his name is Steve, he was a first engineer on one of my ships. The reason Steve was still on wife number 1 is because he made sure that he went back for things like that. He made sure that he's intentionally spent time with his wife. Like he was very intentional, even if it meant, leaving the ship high and dry sometimes. There's a very big culture in the military and at sea in particular of being a good shipmate. And usually if somebody's talking about that, they're just trying to manipulate you into doing something that's good for them and crappy for you. Come on, man, don't be a bad shipmate. Be a good shipmate. And so this idea of the first engineer, who, by the way, the ship cannot sail without, you have to have a first engineer, of him saying, sorry, guys, I've got a kid who's about to be born, and it's time. I've done my hitch. It's not my fault. You didn't find me a relief. I'm going home. Fire me if you want.
Okay.
And now the ship, but hey, guess what? Miraculously, the company always found a way to keep things operating. They just didn't want to have to. They just wanted him to stay there longer than he was supposed to. So, he got kind of a bad rap from some guys, but I always respected him for that. I thought that was one of the strongest moves the countercultural move in that culture that someone could make, was to actually prioritize their family above the ship.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. So that's why I knew eventually I wanted to stop shipping. I saw the world. I made good money. I got it all done. It's like, okay, time to come ashore. And I had already been married, and okay, time to start a family. And sure enough, that was the catalyst that kicked off my divorce. And there was a lot behind that. It wasn't just that I came home and we didn't like each other. that's not what was going on. But that was the catalyst. So I announced my intent to retire, and she announced her intent to leave.
I'd say it's her loss, but
Well, you're a
I
good
mean,
company.
you were a first trumpet after all, right? So
That's right. But actually, I would bring my trumpet with me on the ship and practice. I had an electronic mute you could put inside the bell, and
okay,
headphones that would go out, so I could practice and hear it as though I was in a concert hall or something. But the walls on the ships are very very thin. So, but I still never bothered anybody.
I've never heard of an electronic mute. I played trumpet for like 2 years when I was a kid. I think 2 years roughly. And we had like the cork and the kind of, I've seen two different kinds of mutes. One was, I think, tin or some sort of aluminum or something. And then there was another one that was made out of maybe some sort of thin wood or plastic or whatever but I've never heard of that. That's pretty cool. You can just basically play your trumpet to yourself.
Yep.
Huh.
Now, it does make a very quiet sound. Like you can still hear it if you're standing there in the room. You could hear it, but in your ears, it really sounded like you were in a practice hall.
Wow.
So, very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So, what did you do after your shipping career ended?
So I kind of made lateral moves. The first thing I did was to manage a stationary power plant at a local landfill. Fun thing about that is they're using, as the garbage on the hill decomposes, it turns into methane, and they bring the methane in and run it through gas turbines and modified diesel engines and put that electricity back on the local power grid. So really cool operation. They weren't used to getting actual engineers in those positions. It's usually like auto mechanics. The guys who had a functional, like mechanical knowledge, but not someone who had already spent their career being responsible for a power plant. So I come in and they're like, oh, 6 months, you'll be able to run, 2 weeks. I was able to get everything up and running, make all the repairs I needed. So they were very impressed with me. But for all that, I got a whopping 1% raise, even though I more than doubled the revenue production of that facility year over year. So, it became clear pretty quickly, like, this is fun. I stink to high heaven every day, but clearly not going to be a career home. So from there, I got into construction through a family connection. I got in with a local HVAC company. So we built a lot of the high-rise apartments and retail buildings here around DFW. We did the HVAC systems in those. Got pretty good at that. Got so good at it that I was bored all the time. Bored. Told the owner, told the manager, hey, like give me more work. Like let me learn some sales. Like I can design systems. Like let me do something. No, don't. The problem was I was really good at a role that nobody else wanted to do. So for me to take on other responsibilities meant somebody else would have to start doing that. So after a few years there, actually, I guess it was a little over 2. A friend called me up one day and was like, hey, I'm starting a debt collection business. I want you to come run it for me. I was like, okay. Never done that. Don't know anything about that. I've never been in an inside cap, meaning I've never been in like an office environment. I'm kind of, spent more than a decade around these really rough guys. We kind of burp and fart and, cuss and do all this stuff whenever we want. And I don't know. I don't think I'm your guy. I think you want someone else. And no, he was adamant. It's like, no, it's got to be you. But it was great. It doesn't sound like being in debt collection would be great. But I learned so much about how our financial system works, the rights that people have as creditors, or excuse me, as debtors. And nobody knows. Like nobody knows. They get these high pressure collector calls, and people manipulate them into making terrible decisions, like liquidating their 401k to pay off a credit card bill or a hospital bill or something. And so our mission really, he was a Christian as well. our mission really was to run this business in a Christian way. We weren't going to do these high pressure manipulative sales tactics. But what we didn't, and we did well. We were profitable in our third month, which is unheard of. But after less than a year, we found out that the partners, the owners, hated each other and just decided to throw up their hands and say, we're done, shut it all down. And so I suddenly found myself unemployed. But I learned so much, and I just had this idea that, gosh, there's so much to know about finance. I always hated finance. So all these econ classes we had to take, and we had a Jewish professor who made us learn how to pick stocks, and I just hated it. I hated it. It's so funny because that's like my whole job now. But what motivated me to go further down this financial rabbit hole was this idea that there's so much to know. Like the finances, it's really an arcane system. It's very complex. There's a lot to learn, and this is what I do, right? I take very complicated systems and I simplify them. I make them actionable and manageable and digestible, and so that part of this finance world was appealing to me. So I went off and became a financial advisor. Did that for a few years, and then COVID hit and really just pulled the rug out from under me. But even though I had all the makings of a pretty successful practice, at least for a new practice, I just suddenly found myself unable to bring in new clients. I had a back injury to deal with at the time. We just had our second set of twins. So it was tough. It was real tough. And found in that it was going to be better for my family that I didn't have a commission-based income. And so got hooked up with another friend of mine who has let me step into this kind of hybrid role where I'm kind of part advisor, part analyst. And by the way, I have to say this for everybody out there in TV land. I am in finance, but I'm not your financial advisor. So anything I say here is not financial advice. Don't, see somebody about your particular situation. I can talk concepts, high level stuff, but nothing I say is financial advice. So, but it is a deep and fascinating rabbit hole, and you can go as deep as you want, and you can get off into some pretty tinfoil hatty sounding stuff that actually ends up being totally legit. But that's the short version.
Wow.
to how I made the transition, and it really is just a different kind of engineering. The problem is you also have to be likable so that people trust you and take your advice. With a machine, the machine doesn't care if you're nice, if you're presenting something in a palatable way, if you're being too mean, or the machine just does what it's told. You give it what it needs, you find out what's wrong with it, you fix it, right? It just runs.
Yeah.
Turns out people don't work that way. Very strange.
So how's your without getting into absolute detail or politics, how's your job in 2022 with the financial, what is it? We're in a bear market. Is that what they call it now? / recession?
Yep. There's the headline is that we're in a technical recession. That's because we're actually in a recession. But yeah, it is everything you read, everything you hear. We're in the middle of the deflating of what we call an everything bubble. 12 years of easy monetary policy from our central bank, very artificially low interest rates, has created this environment where everything can appreciate in value. It's because the cost of investing in a business, or the cost of doing business, is so low that there's a lot more room for profit. This is all very, very general, very broad. So now that interest rates are going back up, everybody knows that those margins are going to shrink. They're going to be eaten up by the cost of borrowing money. And that's exactly what it's intended to do. But when everything was being propped up by these low interest rates, now everything is coming down because interest rates are going up. So there's really nowhere to hide. We have this horrible situation of even your cash. Even if you're just sitting in cash, we still have 8.5% inflation. And in terms of real purchasing power, like what it's actually costing you to live year over year, it's probably a lot higher for most people. It's probably more like 10 or 15, or in some cases, closer to 20%. Your cost of living has gone up. We have a friend of mine, his car insurance just went up 40%. His premiums just went up 40%. And that's just, so you have inflation, and that's gonna hit everything. But you also have your safe money, which traditionally has been, I say safe and scare quotes. That's been bonds, these fixed income things. Well, those things are down 10 and 15% and more. Not to mention stocks that are down 20 and 30 and 40 and 60%. So there's nowhere to hide. But the reconditioning that I get to do in this industry is not to get nervous or scared, but actually excited when things get down like this. Because stocks are the only thing in the world that people will not buy when there's a sale. Everything else, when the price gets cut, you go buy it. Oh, I can finally get those shoes. Oh, this TV I want has been on sale. It's on sale. Everything's on sale. I'll go buy it. But when stocks go on sale, people sell. And that's just about the absolute worst thing you can do. But what we've been telling our clients is, about the time where you feel like you want to throw up in the trash can every day, that's about the time it's probably good to start buying.
Oh gosh, fun times.
It is, and this is there are people in our industry, and our industry is one of the least trusted industries in the world for good reason. But the way we get to do and get to operate in this business as Christians, even if our clients are not Christians, they still resonate with the idea, the thought that there are things that are more important than you, things that are more important than your money, than your portfolio. And those things are different for everybody, right? For you and I, that's Jesus Christ, right? And our entire, everything we do is slave to his glory, right? But even for somebody who's not a Christian, that's kids, that's family, that's the business that they're trying to build, that's the next generation, that's a charity that they love. It's they can get this idea that there has to be transcendence. Like money is just a tool, right? It's an intermediary. It's for exchange. Money is not the thing that gets you what you want, because what you want is a comfortable lifestyle or financial security, or to be able to send your kids to a great school, or to be able to get a hospital wing named after you because you're so generous, right? These are the things you want, and money is the thing that gets you there. And so being able to really counsel clients through this different financial mindset, where it's like, hey, transcendence for us means Jesus. For you, it means these things. Either way, don't focus on the money. We're talking about 20 or 30 years of trying to grow this money. These few months, they're painful. Like, don't hear us trying to tell you that it doesn't suck to see red in your portfolio, but like, this is a drop in the bucket. And really, if this is your goal, all these transcendent things we're talking about, then there are some really cool, really opportunistic things we can do now to get there faster, bigger, better, safer, however you want to talk about that.
Yeah. How do you find that's received by your clients?
Very
like
well.
That?
Very well. A lot of people end up talking to various professionals about various areas of their life, whether that's a doctor, a lawyer, an insurance person, or someone in finance. But almost nobody, I think a lot of professionals believe that a client or a customer, they just want to hear about this thing that they've hired you to do. They just tell me about my portfolio. Just tell me about my insurance. Just tell me about my will. Just tell me about, don't talk to me about my personal life. Don't talk to me about transcendence. Nothing could be further from the truth. And especially with wealthy people, nobody else is talking to wealthy people about, hey, how much can you give away? People in our industry are telling them, hey, I can grow your portfolio so that you can pay yourself more and, live larger, buy a yacht, take trips, really worldly goals. But it kind of blows people's mind when you come in and say, yeah, screw all that. Transcendence. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the thing that's more important than the money. And then once we know what that is, how do we make the money work for this in a meaningful way so that your peace of mind and your personal identity is not wrapped up in your portfolio, which you have no control over. Even if you put it all in cash, you have no control over whether the government can reach in and take that from you, whether the bank can freeze that and prevent you from getting to it for one of any number of reasons. Don't put your identity in something that you don't control.
I forget.
Go ahead.
I forget who said it, but money is a great tool, but a poor master.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. And it has this really perverse way of, I'm trying to think of like a literary analogy or something for this, but this really perverse way of the whole time you think you're in charge of it, it's in charge of you. So you think because I'm investing in this and I'm buying that, I'm moving money here, and because I'm doing all these things, I'm in control of my money, which means I'm in control of my present and my future and my goals. And really the whole time it's one day in the market where your portfolio gets cut in half because there's a global pandemic, or because there's illiquidity in the money market, or because Vladimir Putin starts firing nukes. You learn very quickly, oh, I actually have no control over this at all. And now I'm terrified. So really the most valuable thing we can do for our clients, whether they're Christians or not, is get them to a place where they're not terrified because they understand you really have no control. We're going to help you steward, but none of this is yours anyway. We want to help you do the best job we can with it, but not in a way that makes you miserable, like the parable of the rich fool. The guy who says to my soul, I will build bigger barns, and I will store up wealth, and I'll do this and I'll do that. And, through no control of his own, God just says, okay, fool, your life is required of you this night. And then it's all gone. It's just all gone. So don't put your hope in that. I mean, put your hope in Jesus, but at the very least, don't put your hope in money.
Yeah, that's good advice. And that's good, not financial advice for everyone. That's spiritual advice. You're
that's right.
Maybe not licensed to give that out, but you're allowed to give that. Dude, this has been fascinating. Thanks for sharing so much. Before I let you leave, we have a lightning round. So, number one, what books are on your reading list right now?
Good question. I've got a book given to me by a very dear friend called Living by the Spirit. Shoot, now I'm messing it up. Where'd it go? It should be right here. Life in the Spirit, the Lutheran book about the spiritual gifts and things like that.
Led by the Spirit.
Led by the Spirit. Why am I blanking on it? Yeah, Led by the Spirit. Afraid and Not Afraid. Those are still. I'm working through those. Led by the Spirit. I wish I had started with one of the other. I don't wish, but for the sake of being complete in the reading, it would have been easier to start with Afraid, because Led by the Spirit is good. It's so good, but it's so dense. But I really am enjoying it. I'm just taking it very, very, very slow. My bookshelf is here. My daily read, here within reaching distances, my ESV, my Matthew Henry commentary, my outdated version of Strong's.
I think I have that one.
You really? Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
So those are the things that I use daily. But also within reach is Pilgrim's Progress, Lord of the Rings, Chronicles of Narnia.
All good ones.
All good ones.
All really good ones. Yeah. Christian authors and Christian works all.
Mhm.
So this may have already been answered, but what Bible versions do you use?
Primarily ESV. I think it strikes a really good balance between um, faithful idea translation and readability, digestibility, teachability in particular. I'm blessed to be in a season where I'm actually actively discipling several men at the same time. And one of them is pretty brand new to it, even though he's raised in the church, still pretty brand new to it. So the ESV has been it's been accessible enough that he engages with it and enjoys it, and still challenging enough that it's like, okay, let's talk about what that phrase means or what that word means, because it's unfamiliar to someone who's not been doing this for decades now.
Yeah.
But the KJV will always have a special place in my heart. It's such beautiful language, and I've in recent years I've come to appreciate the value of reading the same thing in different translations. Even, dare I say it, the Message on occasion is not a translation, but but on occasion it has had some very helpful ways of just paraphrasing something. That's okay. That's in very much the same way that God in Hosea, for example, turns the diamond and says, "I'm just like this, and I'm merciful like this, and I'm just like this, and I'm merciful like this." Turning the diamond through the lens of various translations is quite too. And then I have my beloved Heritage Evangelical version as well, Evangelical Heritage version.
Um, did you grow up reading the King James? Was that the one they used in your churches, or?
So when I was very young, yes. So that was really my first exposure to scripture was the King James. But as I grew into kind of tweens and stuff, it was NIV.
Okay.
Most of the stuff in
Gotcha.
that, which is really neat.
That wasn't part of the lightning round. That was for me. So last one would be, what do you do for fun outside of when you're not working or spending time with family?
Ooh, I like games. I like games of many different stripes. So, video games. I've got a game I've started playing with my brother online recently, which has been a really fun way to kind of reconnect with him. I'm a huge Star Wars nerd, so I got this game called X-Wing dropped into my lap by somebody, but it's dogfighting with the miniatures, and my older kids are 6, so they're just old enough to get it and really enjoy it. Now we have to. I have to be patient with things like bumping the table and things like that, but they just enjoy it so much. It's so much
How
fun.
dare they?
I know how offensive, but all the way up to really complex, days-long games like Twilight Imperium, Axis and Allies, and stuff like that. But I've also, I know you said lightning, so it's supposed to be fast, but maybe this is a topic for next time.
I think so.
But I've spent a lot of time in recent months, probably about the past year, just thinking about storytelling. The stories we tell ourselves, the stories we allow others to tell us, and this whole idea around the way that storytelling kind of hijacks your brain, bypasses a lot of reason, a lot of, if somebody came to you and presented a horribly offensive idea, like as something moral, you would recoil. But if they told you a story where the main character was compelling and interesting, but exhibited those ideas, then all of a sudden it's a lot more powerful. Just this whole, what do we fill ourselves up with, and what effects might it be having on us without our actually realizing it yet?
It kind of reminds me of like the true crime craze that I feel like or maybe trend is a better term, but I feel like there's a lot of that phrase, trend. Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of really popular true crime things that are podcasts, documentaries, docudramas, whatever you want to call them. Seems to be pretty common right now. And that you're mentioned about the protagonist who does terrible things, but you like, yeah. Or would that be a protagonist in that sense? I don't know.
The anti-hero, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
whatever
the antagonist.
You're not supposed to. You're not supposed to root for Tony Soprano. He's supposed to be a deplorable, murderous gangster, but somehow by good storytelling.
Yeah. I'd say Fight Club might fall into that category too.
Yeah.
American Psycho, maybe too. Because I mean, there's heavy meme culture around a few of those at least.
Yeah, and if you just step back with a dispassionate view and say, what if I actually saw somebody doing that, or what if somebody I know actually said that to me? Like you'd punch them in the face, you'd run away screaming in fear for your life, But because it's presented in this well-crafted framework of a story that's engaging and interesting to you, suddenly this person becomes someone you root for, maybe envy in some ways, or want to, and at least in a fantasy, live out these deplorable things. Oh, that's awesome. That's so cool. Wasn't it great when he decapitated that guy? Oh, well, maybe.
It's like, yeah, I've seen things like that before where it's like, oh, you're supposed to cheer for these people that are now, like, from a Christian perspective, committing adultery or, sinning sexually, right? And the narrative is getting you to cheer for them, when as a believer you should be sad and disappointed and repulsed or whatever.
Yeah.
So fascinating. Okay, that's topic for next time, I think. I really appreciate it. Thanks, man.
Hey, man, this was great. It's fun to tell stories, and explore, looking back and looking forward, where the gospel weighs on every area of our life, and getting to reflect, on how the Lord was moving at times when I wasn't even really acknowledging him. So
yeah,
this was great. I had a blast.
Awesome. Well, and thanks everyone for joining us. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel. We will be releasing one of these every week. And if you do want to be notified for when one of these goes live, you can click the bell, right? Should be like right above or right next to the subscribe button. So, and leave a comment. Tell me your favorite Bible version or your favorite story that made you do a double take.
Or interesting maritime facts.
Yes, give us some more interesting maritime facts. Thanks for educating us on that.
It never fails, honestly. Anytime in a setting like this, it's the maritime part of my past that people get interested by, which is a lot of fun for me.
I really enjoyed hearing it. Well, until next time, Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you his peace. See you later.